Salford is still standing in support of Ukraine as aid agencies have found themselves overwhelmed by donations. They are now asking for financial help instead. Here with us in the studio is Sophie Rumsby. So Sophie, it sounds like Salford aid agencies are now asking for money instead of physical donations.
Yes, agencies in Salford have said they are incredibly grateful for all the donations, but now are looking for more financial aid in order to help people in Ukraine who are still fighting Russian forces. Authorities in Ukraine have said at least 107 children have been killed since the start of the invasion, and the Polish Border Guard Agency have said 1.95 million people have fled Ukraine to Poland since the beginning of the war. BBC foreign correspondent Beake has been following the situation in Ukraine.
There were two things that really hit me hard when I was reporting from Ukraine. When it was time for us to leave the capital, Kyiv, and make our way out of Ukraine, we saw that every town or village or community we passed through looked the same. And that's because there was normally a church, a Ukrainian flag flying, and also a roadblock that had been set up to stop any advancing Russian tanks. The second thing were men of all ages. Some were professional soldiers, but others were civilians, and they were wearing their own clothes. And it was clear that quite a few had probably only picked up a rifle for the first time in their lives. They were prepared to put up an almighty fight.
And there have been some anti-war protests in Russia.
Well, it's difficult to know exactly due to the reporting restrictions. Vladimir Putin is controlling what Russians see, hear and read about what is going on in Ukraine. He says it's not a war or invasion, it's a special military operation to protect the Russian-speaking population of eastern Ukraine. Accusations of war crimes by the Russians are either not shown or they are dismissed as fake news constructed by Ukraine and the West. BBC foreign correspondent Jenny Hill is in Moscow.
It's really hard for independent media to tell the truth. That's partially because the Kremlin changed the law just a few days ago. And that means that anyone who deliberately spreads or publishes what the Kremlin would deem to be false information can be punishable by up to 15 years in prison. It's either tell the truth and go to jail or get out of the country.
Things changing for people in Russia?
Yes, so Russians are now starting to notice that things are changing in their country. Here's Jenny Hill again.
So we have started to see some supermarkets are restricting the amount of goods that people can buy. Prices are starting to go up, and it's not as easy as it was to get hold of things. The real economic pain that analysts say most Russians are going to feel really deeply hasn't yet started to bite.
The war in Ukraine could cut global economic growth by more than 1 percentage point in the first year after the invasion, according to a new report. The Organisation for Economic Development said the impact could cause a deep recession in Russia if it is sustained.
Thank you, Sophie.